Yeah. So let's see there. So yeah, so the mouse, it's talking about the Ethernet. That's how we first got connected in networks. And so, for example, here at the college, we have a local area network, and everybody's connected by this copper wire Ethernet to a telecoms cabinet, and then to fiber, which makes what we call the backbone. And then the backbone goes to our entrance facility, which gives us connection to Rito. And so we are connected not just to everybody in the college, but actually to the internet. Now, the internet hasn't been around as long as computers have been around. As you can see here, it's started in 1962. Now, the internet in 1962 was only limited to a few people. And those people were mostly working for ARPANET, which was an arm of the US military. Then there's a couple of universities that got involved with it. And those are universities like in San Francisco and Colorado and Utah. They started using it, and some scientists there, engineers, sort of developed an email system. And so I think that's here, right? Yeah, 1971. These guys wrote they developed a email system. DoD stands for Department of Defense. And so the military, yeah, they've always been involved in this, right? And so we had email in 1971, and that was becoming common through there. The first actual internet that people in the public were able to use would be like in the mid-1980s. But that first internet didn't have a graphical interface. The interface it had was like that interface that I showed you that you have to type stuff. That was the interface that it had. And there's some bulletin boards on there, but it wasn't really all that intuitive. It's not the type of thing that a kid, unless they were a sort of whiz kid like Bill Gates. Bill Gates, really smart guy, but he had some advantages that most kids didn't have. I don't know if you know that, but he lived in Washington, in Seattle, very close to the University of Washington. The University of Washington had some computers on it, and his dad was associated with that. And as a 12-year-old, he was able to go up to the university and play on the computers. That's what he did for his. Now, how many kids could do that? Not very many. But I mean, you know, he was the right kid, very smart, in the right place at the right time. So the idea of the World Wide Web, that's different than the idea of the internet. The internet is the technology that gives the connections. All right, so that's networking. And so that happened, as we say, started in the 60s. In the 1980s, we got to a point where we could sort of connect everybody around the world. But the World Wide Web, on the other hand, is how that's presented. And the graphical way that that was presented really started with this thing called Mosaic. So Mosaic was a presentation on the internet using HTML, which meant that you could have pages that would have text and pictures and stuff like that. So people would look at it and be a bit more satisfying. That's what we call Web 1.0. Web 1.0 was just people putting stuff on the internet and sort of typing words, putting pictures. It was a place to show things, but it wasn't interactive, as opposed to Web 2.0, which we sort of started in the middle of the 2000s. And that's where people started interacting on the web. You're pushing buttons and you're paying for things. You know, you're shopping on the internet. You're buying your airplane tickets. You're doing all kind. You're interacting with other people a lot more. That social networking in real time. So the Web 2.0, that had to have a lot of new tools so that we could get Web 2.0. So for example, to have a dynamic web page, as opposed to those old static web pages, the static web page, you just put something up there and people look at it. So now we got a dynamic web page. You push something, a button on the page, and the page changes, right? The text changes, things, colors change. You buy things. There's a lot of new technology, including a lot of security technology that had to go into getting the new web. You'll learn about that if you do software development. So one of the things in particular was JavaScript. So we had a whole lot of new programming languages. We had HTML, but then we had to have JavaScript so we could have interaction on the page. Sorry, you're asking a question. Sorry? Mosaic? Maybe. I don't know anybody who's used it in the last 15 years, right? So Mosaic came out. Very soon afterwards, that came a new company called Netscape. Netscape, and they had the best browser. It was better than Mosaic. Mosaic, people didn't use it for very long. Netscape was better. And do any of you know Netscape? You know, probably not. All right, it was like 1998, 2000, and then we got these newer, more solid browsers like Firefox, Opera, Safari, Google Chrome. So yeah, I mean, we've got a bunch of browsers now. Some of them are well, I was going to say open source, but I think none of them are you going to pull out your credit card and pay to get them. I don't know. Are you? Firefox, you just download it, free. Google, same. But okay, how free is it, right? So Google, you open an account, then they know everything about you. Of course, they're selling that, right? So when you open your Google account, if you're running a phone which is not Apple, so like mine, then you probably got a Google account, right? When you installed the phone, you had to do it with a Google account. So they're using that account to gather information about you, and it's a pretty big business. But you don't have to pay for the Google account. No, you pay for it in a different way. So Microsoft has its own, right? Microsoft Edge. Microsoft Edge doesn't seem to have the edge. And what I mean by that is we seem to find that there's a lot of things that don't really work with Microsoft so well. Like, for example, D2L. If you try and open your D2L account with Microsoft was preceded by Explorer. And Explorer at one point was kind of the cutting edge at one point, right? And then Google Chrome sort of took over. And some people like Firefox better. They say it's more secure, right? So they're not selling as much information. And likewise, right? So Google, you're going to use Google Chrome, and you're going to do your searching with Google. And then all of that history, they got it, right? So on the other hand, you could use Firefox, or you could use Google Chrome, and you can, instead of searching with Google, you could search with Duckduckgo. Have you guys heard of that one? Duckduckgo. So what Duckduckgo, you can download that and install it on your computer. What Duckduckgo does is they promise that they don't save any of your searching data. So saving searching data, how is that bad for you? I don't know. Maybe it's good because how Google uses it, you might think that's okay. I don't mind them doing that. They search they save all my searches, and so I get on the computer and they show me some ads for me to buy things which are related to searches that I've made. Now, not only do they do that, but they're actually, your phone is actually listening to you as you talk, and you say something, and then you notice the next day or the next hour or the next minute you get an ad related to that thing that you were talking about. So I mean, so that's how they're making money out of you. They're asking you to buy stuff all the time. On the other hand, somebody was murdered. I hate to talk about bad things like this, but you know, it happens, right? The police come around to your house because that somebody is related to you. Well, what are they going to do? They're going to grab your computer, and they're going to go to Google, and they see all the searches you did. And if they see on there that you got a search which says, you know, how to kill somebody, yeah, you're going to jail, right? And we can laugh, but that has actually happened lots and lots of times. The police grab the computer and they look at the searches. And if you searched on, you know, how to dispose a body or something like that, oh yeah, you're going to jail, man. And they're going to get some evidence and sort of say, well, you know, why are you searching that stuff, right? And then this person disappeared. Criminals, some of them are smart, and some of them aren't. So they do searches on stuff like that. Bill Gates. So really, really smart guy, right? I mean, you have to hand it to him. He's a really smart guy. Can't be too smart. He just got divorced, right? Which is not too smart. But he predicted that we'd only ever need 640 kilobytes of data on a computer. That was his prediction. Now, of course, now we all have gigabytes of data on our memory. So he was wrong, but he was right about a lot of other things. You guys know these guys? All right, so they invented Google, but when they invented it, they didn't call it Google. They called it back rub. Okay, but Google is a word that actually means something, apparently. Apparently, it means 100 zeros. That's a big number, right? So the idea being that Google would be able to give you so much information. So in order for them to give you so much information, Google had to gather the information and sort it. That was the big thing, sorting. So you're going to learn in your computing studies as you go about different kinds of sorts. You can have really, really inefficient sorts, and you can have efficient sorts. Obviously, if we're going to be sorting something that is a lot of stuff, we want the most efficient sorts. And so that's an area of a lot of study for computer scientists, is how do we get really, really efficient sorts, etc. All right, there's an overview of the history. Most of you are, your lifespan only covers this column. And so a lot of stuff happened in computing before you were born, but since you were born, a lot of stuff has happened too, right? If you watch a movie from 15 years ago, look at the phone that they're using. It's a flip phone, right? All it does is make phone calls. It was a phone. I mean, I'm not sure I even call this a phone. If I divided up the time that I spend on this, how much time am I actually making phone calls and how much time am I doing other stuff? Making phone calls is not very much of the time, right? It's only a very, very little bit of the time, right? So what I've basically got now is a portable computer with a touchscreen interface, which just happens to have a phone in it, but it does a lot of other stuff. Yeah, so I think that surprised a lot of people. All right, so here's just a rundown review. Steve Jobs, what did he do? Apple, which is kind of awesome. Steve Jobs, if you knew a little bit more about him, besides being kind of an unpleasant guy, yeah, obviously really, really smart, but he was really interested in artistic things. And so I think that came across in his wanting to have a computer that you could do graphics with. And so for a long time, Apple computers was the place where people went if they had an artistic, they want to do art on a computer, they would go and get an Apple product, right? Because so Apple focused on that. They even made their computers look nice. He's Syrian, or his mother was, or her father was, or something like that, right? Was he born in Syria? I don't know. One of his, yeah, ethnically he's Syrian. Yeah, okay, I get it. That's interesting. Charles Babbage, going back a long time, he made a machine that could do calculations. And if you looked at it, it was like a really, really big, complicated clock, right? Turing, he came up with the Turing test, which is, we will know that a computer has achieved artificial intelligence when it can beat a human person at some particular task. Then this Dr. Rear Admiral Grace Hopper, who developed the COBOL programming language, very nice. And Blaise Pascal from like almost 400 years ago. Kind of another pretty smart guy who had something to do with computing. So what I want to do now is I want to go to the, I'm going to continue. Is that all right? So we can fit this all into one recording. The next lecture is a lot shorter. It's only a few minutes, I think, especially if I skip through it. So let's look at it. Computers nowadays, the gist of the next couple of slides is computers are kind of hiding in plain sight. But so what I mean by that is a lot of times you see computers and you wouldn't even think, oh, that's a computer, right? So you look under the hood of your car, there's a computer, right? There's a computer in your car, which is necessary so that we don't burn too much gasoline, so that we get the exact right amount of gasoline to get the right amount of power to make the engine last, etc. And actually, when I say we have to have that in our car, because in countries like in the United States, they brought in the and in Europe, they brought in these rules which said a car can only produce so much pollution, right? If you have more pollution than that, you can't make that car. And so in order to do that, you had to get the exact right amount of gas mixed with the exact right amount of air to explode. And that's done by computers. We got sensors. We got a sensor called the O2 sensor, oxygen sensor, which measures how much oxygen is coming out the exhaust, temperature sensors, etc. And so based on what those sensors have, the computer does a computation and injects into the motor the exact right amount of gasoline to get the most efficient explosion. Now, the most efficient explosion, if you're a racer, so you're racing your car or you're racing your motorbike, you might say, well, it comes out of the factory set to get the most efficiency, so that it'll pass the law in California, right? Because California has these really, really strict laws. But I don't want to pass the law in California. What I want is I want my car to be the fastest one. And so this might not be the setting that makes it the fastest one. So what I'll do is I have a little port in my that's underneath the dash, and I plug to that to my laptop computer, and I have a program in there, and I can change it. I can change the amount of gasoline and when that comes, and so I can get a bit more power out of my car, so I can beat the other cars that are kind of like my car on the racetrack. And so if you'll talk to racers, they've got that right. They've got a laptop computer, they got a program, and they're changing the characteristics of their car or their motorcycle so that it will do what they want it to do. And so that's programming, I guess you could say. That's a computer. It's in your car. Here's a computer on my arm. Here's a computer. We got lots of computers everywhere, right? That we take them for granted. These are some computers that we all use. Desktop computer, laptop computer, Mac type computer, I guess. There's some other computers. We got the smartwatch, phone. We do a lot of things on those. In your house, you could have a lot of computers. You have a computer on your fridge. So what's the other things? Now, one of the students here in my other class, or maybe it was this class. No, we didn't talk about this yet, did we? So yeah, in my other class, he was saying he's got that set up in his room, right? So he's got sensors on things, and he can control the air conditioning in his room from his mobile phone. So if you got something like that, your mobile phone is connected by the internet. You could be sitting at home and say, okay, I'm going home in an hour. I'll change the air conditioning settings so it's just at the exact temperature that I want. And then while I'm away for 12 hours, maybe I can even turn the air conditioner off. Save. Now I don't know if that would save. You could, maybe you need to write a computer program to find out. Maybe turning off the air conditioner doesn't save you electricity because the temperature goes really up, and then you have to do. I don't know. But you could have a smart home. Where you're measuring the temperatures of things, you're measuring the humidity of things, you're measuring how much stuff is in your fridge, you're measuring what if people came to the door or came to the window. So you got a security device on there, and all of that. Then you could connect to your phone. If you have a baby in your house, and maybe you have a house, maybe you have a maid that takes care of that baby, you could have a camera in the room where the baby is. And so you could sit at work and you can say, oh, I want to see how my baby is. If you got a baby, you probably care a lot that a lot, right? Okay. So I just go in there and, oh, look, there's my baby. Looks pretty good. Now I feel better. I can work better. So, that all of those things are sort of, and you could get an alert, right? So you could have a thing, right? If the baby starts crying, that you get an alert, or, etc. You could have that on your own body. So if you're a person that has some kind of, that's the next slide, actually, the own body thing, right? If you're a person that has some kind of medical issues, you could spend a lot of time going to a doctor or going to the hospital. And what do you do when you go to the hospital or the doctor? They measure your blood pressure and they measure your temperature and all that kind of stuff. What if you could just measure that with your computers that are stuck to your body, right? You could measure your blood pressure, you could measure your temperature, and then you could have an app on your phone which communicates with those devices by Bluetooth, and then that app also communicates to your doctor. And so if something happens with your blood pressure or your heart rate changes in a wrong way, your doctor gets a message. Patient needs some help. And then the doctor could intervene, so the doctor could deal with a lot more patients, or could deal with you a lot without actually having to come to your house a lot. And you could get a faster response also. And we got some other things there, like smart shoes. So the smart shoes, so they got some kind of sensor in the shoe which measures the actual pressure of your on the shoe sole. So if you're running, that's going to change a lot, right? If you're just walking or standing, there's a certain pressure that's going to be there. But if you're running, you're going to have a high impact. Now that high impact, that's going to damage your body a bit if you do a lot of high impact. So when I say that, human beings, we're really pretty tough and we're pretty good at running. There's human beings that have lived in some places like in Africa, they'll run all day long, right? You know, it's like these Ethiopian people. And we're like that too. With a little bit of training, we could probably run all day long, which is more than most animals can do. We can actually do it for a long time. We're pretty good at it. But if you look at those human beings that run all day long, if you look at them, they're kind of tall and they're kind of skinny. And not all human beings are tall and skinny. So if you're a big guy and you start running a lot, that's a lot of weight. That's a lot of pressure on your joints, and you could damage them. And so if you could measure how much pressure that was, you could keep that under control. Or you could just go to a different kind of exercise, right? You can go to cycling, which is low impact, or swimming. But yeah, so running can be really, really good, and some of us can do it really well. It's really good for people that are not too heavy. That's my thing. Okay, so you can discount that if you want. I'm not a doctor expert. That's an opinion. All right. So take that with a grain of salt. These devices are all computers. Your television set is nowadays probably a smart TV set. I know that because I go and sit down in the living room and I want to watch a TV, and my daughter comes in and all of a sudden it's got YouTube on my computer. I mean, on my TV, because she's communicating with her phone to the smart TV, and she just puts on there whatever she wants, right? And so you got that. Play games. What's this thing here? That was okay. Network storage device, photocopiers that we can control. Like I can sit in my office and I can tell a photocopier to do something. I can tell the one that's down the hallway. I can tell the one that's across the campus. I could sit at my office and tell a computer. Sorry, I could sit in my house and dial into the college, not dial in, but connect to the college using a VPN and print something off. Well, I could send the command to the printer, then I have to go through a security to print it off. Now we talked about computers that were this big. The first computers were this big, right? So we don't need them anymore, right? Because we're just making our computers like this. Well, actually, no, we do need those big, big computers. But those big, big computers now, we call them supercomputers. They're much, much, much more powerful than the early big computers. They're much, much more powerful than the computers we're used to using here. And so they're used for a lot of sharing. And so we talk about cloud computing. So in Ireland, in Denmark, in Iceland, it tends to happen in these cooler places, and you can draw your own conclusion why that is. I think it's because computers produce a lot of heat, and you need to reduce that temperature. If you go down to our big computer room down here, the entrance, take a jacket with you because it's like 15 to 18 degrees in there. It's cold. They're doing that because they need to get the heat out of the computer. Heat wrecks computers. And so that's why I think they have these big sites, especially in places like Iceland and Ireland, because it's cooler. It doesn't cost as much to make it cold. And they're connected by fiber to the rest of the world. And we have our cloud computing. You may have heard of AWS, which is an Amazon company, which will allow you to do your computing on their servers. And you can have a big computer system that you're using, which is all on their hardware sitting in Ireland, without you having to put a lot of computer hardware yourself. Cloud computing, we call that. That's a modern thing. Kind of everybody's doing that now. Well, not everybody, but it is a great idea if you have a rapidly changing computer environment. So what is a computer? All of those things are computers, right? What do? They do things fast, right? The very first computers, remember the Hollerith thing? The idea was it took 10 years to do the census. With the Hollerith computer, we could do it in a year. Well, it's not so fast, but it's faster than before. Nowadays, there's somebody here in Qatar that could press a button on a computer and they could tell you how many people have had their COVID injections and which COVID injections they've had, right? Because we know that because we got it on our Etris app. So that's going through a server somewhere. They would be able to do that. They'd also be able to give you a list in just a couple of seconds of who are the people that haven't had their injection, and and where are they, and that type of thing. So all of that's available through computers. That requires a lot of speed. It also requires a lot of storage capacity because there's millions of people at Qatar, I mean, I don't know exactly what the number it is, but it's more than 3 million people in Qatar now, I think. There's a lot of people here. So there's a lot of records on Ethereum that they have to have. They've got one for everybody, right? I mean, you don't go outside your house without Ethereum. So everybody's got one. And so that's all connected to a computer somewhere. So that's a huge amount of storage. It must be accurate, right? I don't want to end up with a red Ethereum because my neighbor, went to Philippines. That's it must be me that is related to my thing, not somebody else, right? So it must be accurate. And our computers can do a lot of different things. So I keep up on holding up my phone because I call this a computer. This is a computer that's in my pocket. Is it versatile? Oh, heck yeah. What can I do with this? So many things, right? I mean, I can watch videos. I can use this to actually get into the college network because it works just like a computer except smaller. I've got a calculator device on there. I can check the weather. I mean, so many things that I would have had to go to many things. I use it for a GPS. So whenever I'm traveling, this is my GPS. Many other things that you can use your computer for. So versatile now. Now, this diagram, what's important in this diagram is the logarithmic scale. How logarithmic scale works is every unit that you go up is 10 times as big as the unit below it. So this is 1,000, this is 10,000, this is 100,000, a million, 10 million, 100 million, a billion, 20 billion. All right, so it's 10 billion, yeah, and then 20 billion. So we have to do that. If we have a graph that goes up so steep that we can't actually see what that angle is on that graph, what we'll often do is we'll apply it to a logarithmic scale. And so instead of going up so steep, we end up with a straight line. If you take an exponential graph and convert it to a log, then you get a straight line. But what this means, you understand that, right? Going from here to here is not one rising 1 for 1. It's rising 10 for 1. So it's actually going up very steeply. So what's going up very steeply? What that graph is, if we look at the top, we'll see. It's the number of transistors on each individual integrated circuit chip. So we're getting to the point now in 2000. Sorry, I don't see the bottom of that, but in the year 2016, where we're getting 20 billion transistors on an individual chip. Remember, that's made out of that silicon dioxide, cheap stuff, right? So the power of our computers is going up a lot. Now that has to do with memory. Now you might, yeah, so our memory has got a lot cheaper. There's one thing that I have noticed is not really changed too much in the last 10 years is the speed of the processors. That seems to have hit a bit of a plateau if we're talking about speed. But I expect that it will go up in the future. And I think the reason why the speed has stopped, going up really quickly is because we found that those processors, as we're getting to that 2.4 gigahertz, we're producing a lot of heat. And, we have to solve the heat problem. How do we get rid of all that heat that's coming out of those computers? If we can't get rid of the heat, we can't go faster. And so they have come up with some solutions, I suppose. They break the processing down into multiple processors. And so have multiple processors around the thing so we can distribute that heat a bit more. But I think the ultimate thing, what I'm hoping for, and I don't know, I'm not an engineer in this. I've just read it a little bit, and I'm hoping that'll happen is people are talking about having light processors. The idea of a light processor is the communication between the different components. Instead of having electricity, which is electrons, we would have photons, which is light. And the benefit of having light communication as opposed to electron communication, because of the fiber optics, right? We already have fiber optics. Fiber cables, you can send a lot more faster without producing any heat. They don't get warm at all. Whereas copper wires, if you want to put an electric current down there, yeah, it's going to get hot. And yeah, so that would solve that problem. I think they will solve it. So the other one is sort of related to that. Again, it's another logarithmic scale. Can you see that every time we go up a unit, it's actually multiplying by 10? And this is the speed of the processor exactly. And so we see that the speed of the processor is going up. It looks like a straight line, but it's a logarithmic, so it would be an exponential curve. It would look like this. So our speed is here and our time is here. When we say time, we mean in years, and we're finding that that speed is going up like that. That's what I mean, but that's an exponential curve. And then we take an exponential curve and we convert it. If we put a log on this side, we get a line. It's a trick that scientists have been using in their reports for a long time. All right, so we're almost done. So going back to our friend Turing, did the computer get to the point of artificial intelligence? How will we know? When the computer can beat the human at a intellectual task. I got 10 minutes left now. I'm not going to use all that. So we have got a computer that can beat a chess master. So that happened a long time ago. Now, I don't know if you'd say that that's artificial intelligence, because basically you can come up with just a bunch of rules to win at chess. I mean, you'd have to talk to chess experts to get those rules. But once you got those rules, it could do it. You got a computer that beat people at a general knowledge quiz. I think that's what Jeopardy is. Jeopardy is, you know, they ask you questions and see how much you know. Well, a computer can beat the champions at that. So you can store a lot of information. There's this other game that they play in Japan, I think, AlphaGo, and computer can beat those guys. So basic games, computers can win. But there's some places that the computer just hasn't got it yet. And some of it is because we as people, we underestimate a lot of the things that go into human intelligence. And one of the things that goes into human intelligence is just perception. That is, how do we understand what it is we see and we hear? And the example I want to give you about that is the self-driving car. So, you know, you can put cameras all over cars, and you can measure the speed of the car and all kinds of things. You can do a lot of measurements on cars, and you have a computer that does things really quickly. You'd think that they would make a perfect car. And so Uber and Google, they were experimenting with self-driving cars. And so no person in the car is just driving along, or there may be a person in the car, but the person's not controlling the car. They're sitting in the passenger seat, and the actual car is being controlled by the computer. And so in 2016, one of these Uber cars driving down a road in a city in the United States, a lady walked across the street, not at the crosswalk. She just walked, we call it jaywalking, right? Just walking across where you're not supposed to be walking across. She had a bicycle, and the car hit her and killed her. And so as a result of that, I don't think we see, I think Uber is not using self-driving cars, because how can you, right? I mean, you got to kill people. You can't do that. Even so, I mean, and the standard is high, because do human drivers hit people and kill them? Yeah, like every week that's happening. But if a computer does it, it's kind of unacceptable, if you know what I mean. And if a human does it, they usually they have something bad happen to them as well. But if a computer does it, we can't have that. We can't have computers driving on people and killing them. And so we have to solve that problem. The computer doesn't have to be just as good as an average person. It has to be as good as any person, I guess you could say, in driving on the road. And they definitely haven't got to that. Can a computer compute anything? I don't know. That's such a broad question. I guess I'd just leave it to say that humans are really, really complicated, really, really complicated. And I think there's a lot. The more we know about people, the more we know that we don't know about people. And that comes back to the car driving, right? You might just say, oh, we'll just put some cameras on there, and then we know everything that a human knows when they look. Well, not really, because when we look and we understand what we see, our eyes are connected to a huge part of our brain. You know, so there's a lot of that happening in our brain. It's not just our eyes. So the processing, it's not just getting the image onto the back of the retina and then sending that as sort of down the neurons. It's then what do you do with that when it gets in there? And that's kind of what I think that they haven't sort of sorted out with the Google car yet. And maybe they will. I expect they will, but not this year. I'm going to kind of leave it at that unless there's some questions. Any questions on what we have? So in summary, I'd say, well, computers have just gone crazy in terms of their impact on us, and they will continue to. But there's still a lot of scope for development. There's plenty of more problems to solve, and that's what you guys are going to do, right? in the next 10, 20 years, you'll be involved in that. All right, so I'm going to stop now. Anybody has any questions? I'll be here sitting at the desk. I'm going to play with the video. And but if you have any questions, just come and ask me. Otherwise, you can leave. We're done. Okay. But as you go, I'm trying to learn people's names. So can your name? Iza? Iza? Fiza. Fiza, right. And yes, that's right. Shahid. 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 2 H's. Shahid. Fiza. Shahid. Kusuma. Thank you, Kusuma. Afi. Afiv. Fiv. 2 F's. Afiv. So the sign-in sheet, is that out there somewhere? Because people should sign. Yeah, you guys signed? Okay. So again, this is Haya. Haya. Haya and Aya. And Haya, Aya, and Samina? Thamina with a TH. I remember from last time. Thamina. Wait. Ahmed. Ahmed. Cheers. Muhammad Al-Thamim. Al-Thamimi. Samimi. Tamimi. Okay, Tamimi. Okay, there's a law firm in UAE which is called Tamimi. Are they related to you? Okay, a bunch of lawyers over there. I got the same name now. Abdullah. Yes. Is it Abdallah or Abdullah? Okay. It's okay. Abdullah. Cheers. Muhammad Al-Tamimi, Abdullah. Sahad. Fahad. 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 Thank you, Fahad. Habiba. Dear. Habiba. Farheen. Farheen. I will get it. I will get it. And again. Tamima. Thamina. Thamina. Thank you. All right. So we got a chat there. Thanks.